you know, you come into this tree 35 years later, you know, the wood right here is going to be the same wood, and it's just going to be layers, rings of growth around it, you know. And if the branch is removed, you know, it may hopefully callus over, you know, and that there'll be that trace of that cut, this little flat cut is going to be there buried in the tree forever. You know, you leave a stub, you know, you might get sprouts here, you know, eventually this trunk may swallow that all right up, and you still have that trace of a stub. That all makes sense. So you can imagine like the trees are nestled cones of wood. Each year, you know, another layer. They're barely or effectively not growing over the winter. Trees are dormant, and then spring comes, sap flow comes up, soil warms, cells start dividing, and then new wood, new bark grows, new buds. Typically, in the year, deciduous trees, pretty reliably in this climate, they will grow 1 year and then branch a subsequent year. And you can trace the rate of growth on a tree pretty simply. So like this grew last year, it grew to here, from here, you know, the year before, year 3, this was back to the trunk, you know, and that, so that's, in this case, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years of growth. And you know, looking at trees, you can see how fast is a tree growing, what's the rate of growth, by tracking, by looking. I mean, last year is often pretty easy to see. You know, and I think that I suspect this tree got pruned somewhat hard 3 years ago, you know, and that it has like responded with, you know, real vigorous growth for a few years.
You're just going by the diameter
and the length.
And the
I mean,
length,
you know, 2+ feet of growth is, I mean, it's kind of a lot of growth. It's not insane, but it's a lot of growth. Versus big old wild crab apples, you can look and it's like there's 6 years of growth, you know, in 1.5 inches. Just can be moving really slow. You know, in this case, these side branches, you know, 10 inches of growth, and also the girth of the wood is just much less. Yeah, so just questions like how's a tree doing? Take a look at new growth. And young trees, seeing a couple feet of growth, great. If it's an older tree doing this, like, you know, something happened, like it got pruned really hard, you know. And this type of wood, you can see it's gone up, straight up for 3 years. Maybe this older stuff, these shorter round fat buds, might be flower buds. These little spurry buds, not there yet. You know, applewood growing at a lower angle, you know, typically will form fruiting wood in 2 years. So grow 1 year, form a fruit bud the second year. In this case, there's, you know, one there that looks like it did it, but on this vertical center it's just so much bigger, slower to form fruiting wood.
So the more horizontal, the more likely it will be to have fruit.
Yeah, horizontal and access to light.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
It's not digressing, but I keep thinking of this with apples and a lot of pears I've gotten here. Like if you have something like that that's just growing up there anyway, like do you weight them? Do you decide that, like, is there any way to take a vertical branch like that and
lots of ways. Spreaders, you know, is like one great way. If you can hang weights, often it's like, you know, the mechanics of anything you do is the hardest part. Spreaders are often pretty simple. Weight's great because of whatever, the branch has a little more movement, but hanging weights and like getting it to stay in place is often fussy. Or tying branches down, I find I'm going to trip or mow it. Sometimes I ripped a third of a tree off, like, you know, tripping over a rope I had tied a branch down to. But the spreaders, I mean, they all work. The other thing that happens, you know, you can, you know, hang a fruit here. You know, actually, you know, each flower, each bud potentially has 5 flowers, potentially 5 fruit. Probably not going to form 5 fruit right here, but that weight of fruit starts to pull it out. And you can imagine, you know, this is so big, it's going to be slow. If you have formed fruit buds out here, this is a long floppy thing. Tree makes, you know, 8 nice big fruit on this branch. All of a sudden, the branch that was going vertically is horizontal. pears, notorious, produce crazy, ropey vertical growth.
Everything's like, yeah.
And then once they start bearing, that wood tends to flop out. Of course, it goes into itself, stays up, or, but that, on pears especially, it's like up, and then it's like, then they start to flop. And
in the post bearing, like that's what I'm like.
Will they come back?
Well, will that like wait? Will that help them stay?
So every year, if it's like this, the second half of the season,
yeah, okay.
that cone of wood is growing around that and is gonna hold it there.
Okay, so it's not like the majority of their growth is going on now before they're
The growth is basically not happening now.
Okay.
Effectively, not growing. And then there's a point you'll see like the tips start elongating. Come like mid-June, they're hopefully zooming along. So if you want to spread a branch, you spread it now, and by the end of the season, it will be held in that position. So in the case of grafting, we're gathering scion wood, preferably of a known variety, and what we want is healthy, vigorous, 1-year-old wood. So that'll be like an unbranched, something. We'll see that, depends a little what we're grafting onto, but it's going to match the diameter of our rootstock. And then this stick is alive. If you stuck this stick, I cut it 20 minutes ago. You stuck this in water, these buds would swell, probably get a little bit of a leaf, and then the stick would crap out because it can only do so much sitting in a glass of water. That said, this is very much alive. Right now, it's in the process of drying out from this tip, and to a very small extent through the bark. The bark and the buds, dormant like this, pretty well sealed thing. As soon as it's leafed out, those buds are starting to go. The leaves are transpiring. Those require a lot of water, are drying out. So gathering scion wood, we're sort of at the far end of scion wood gathering season, because we get few days and nights above freezing, trees start pushing sap, there's a little bit of action. We're definitely not too late. The more action that wood has in terms of sap flow, bud swelling, the more difficult it's going to be to keep that scion wood alive long enough for the cells of the cambium on the rootstock, those dividing cells, and the cambium on the scion to knit. I'm gonna take my phone and turn it off. We're all here. So it's grafting it's a game of keeping that scion alive long enough for it to then knit with the rootstock. Folks know what I mean when I say rootstock? Maybe? Yep. So that's a live root system of, in the case of apples, it'd be another apple tree that we're going to be grafting onto. And that rootstock, may or may not have desirable fruit qualities, but it's in the case, we're grafting because it's not the fruit that we want. It may be a crab apple, maybe a wild apple. In the case of most fruit tree production, rootstocks are also selected for particular qualities. In most cases, it's dwarfing. That is, it's going to produce a tree that is mature at a much smaller size. In the case of like commercial fruit production, having a tree that's managed at 9 to 12 feet, grows 3 to 8 feet wide. There's a lot of efficiencies in terms of spray, pruning, harvest that you get from that tree. Time at which you can have your trees producing and your acreage producing. People are planting 1,200 trees on an acre instead of 120 to 200 trees in the case of standards or semi-dwarf apples. The more expensive upfront costs. Those trees, if you look at the root system, a tree they produce very few large roots that are going to go deep and far. They're very good at sort of getting nutrients in their immediate area, but they're not going to go deep and far. For that reason, the weight of fruit will tip a tree over, actually rip it out of the ground, because those roots tend to be poorly anchored, and that they'll bear a heavy crop on a relatively small tree. Another challenge with those rootstocks. So exactly, so they have permanent support.
Like birds.
Exactly like birds, like most modern commercial apple growing is grown on permanent trellis. The trees are supported for their life. Another challenge with those trees is because that root system is constrained in that area, its demand for nutrient, it's not going to go deep and far. It's not going to form, it's not going to go figure it out somewhere else. Typically, soil in those orchards is managed with herbicides. Like orchards like Champlain orchards, they don't spray. I think they do a great job. They don't spray herbicide under any of their semi-dwarf trees, but underneath the full dwarfs, they feel like they need to, and they're also fertilizing them annually. Where they're not fertilizing mature trees in order to keep the trees healthy, vigorous. It's an ongoing process. Tend to be shorter lived. So sort of with this, like, oh, you get a tree that in 6 years your acreage is producing, you can manage it small. There's downsides. Most of what I plant here is on semi-dwarf rootstocks, larger semi-dwarf rootstocks, and it produces a tree that you could climb into, support a person at some point anyway. But they do tend to set heavier crops sooner and a little easier to manage, at a small. I had one going 4 or 5 years. Beavers took it last fall. I want it. I want to be able to propagate it. The ones I could buy in are on the M7. These are one customer that wanted the M7 rootstock. They're getting it. But it's not one. It's hard for me to buy in the trees I want of this variety, and I'd like to be able to grow it so I can take a stick. Right now, this is nice, dormant, 1 year growth. You can see the rate. These are big commercial nursery, grown in Washington State, long growing season. Grew from here last year. So much bigger. Sometimes you'll see side buds will go, but grew. And these are bud grafted, which I can also talk, but that's typically done in summer. One bud is inserted in the side of a rootstock that's growing in a bed in the ground. It's taped up over the course of the rest of the season. That bud, the wood knits, it doesn't actually grow, and then it's cut off. You can see there's a cut right here, just above that bud, and then energy from that rootstock in the ground. You tend to get real vigorous growth 1 year, and in this case, they're probably this tall, headed back to here, so the side branches go. These are sort of like oversized for what that nursery produces also. So this is, but this is so budded and grown 2 years. And the rootstock is effectively a 3rd year older.
Heavily fed, probably.
Heavily fed, super intensively managed. Yeah.
What was the variety again, Nicko?
This is Wine Crisp.
Wine Crisp, okay.
And let's see.
Like a cross between wine sap and Honeycrisp? Maybe.
Crabapple variety, but it produces a small, deep red fruit. Sap suckers tend to love it. This is a little sap sucker damage, but you can see some clear transitions where the bark, goes from one to another, and there's a little bit of swelling here. Like so, this here, you can also see the wood looks different. This is the wood of the doggo, and then this is the variety. In this case, fireside. Over here, I've got pear apple. That one back there, golden russet.
So cool.
And there, I think this maybe is Connell and Portland. At some point of like the management of a tree with like multiple varieties on it ends up being a bother. Like,
It has
They
all the
all
different
grow a
colored
little
flowers
more
for all the different.
yeah.
Well, right. Well, right. The flowers do vary a little bit. You know, yeah. You know, each one is it's a different thing. Yeah. That's just an example. You know, and so the grafts are all done a few feet up. Yeah, and then labeled as well as I can. This is a nice permanent label. If anybody's trying to figure out permanent
I
label,
was thinking, what is it?
it's a piece of vinyl siding.
Okay.
And then this is like old electrical wire, but copper wire. And then wax pencil or like a dark graphite pencil.
Okay.
Better. Like Sharpie doesn't last. Sharpie lasts about a year in the sun.
And my metal ones, it seems like birds.
The metal ones also, the lighter metal ones anyway, they rip.
Yeah.
Blow. This has been pretty good. Let's see. So then there's a tree up here. That said, I have no reason to suspect the fruit is anything worth keeping. Also, like you can sometimes see like the hard little buds. They're probably small. But this is not an unreasonable place for me to have an apple tree. And what do I do with my stick here? Let's see. That's gonna work. Great.
Just one question about the other tree. Could you have put that in the other tree, or is it like already too big? Or you?
I mean, absolutely. You know, we could today graft 100 different things onto that. I think the grafting onto something that's this diameter is much growing vigorously. You do a good job. It could work. People are like 6 or 8 inches. People do it. I have the best luck, sort of like like this size. This size tends to be like things are growing fast, take well, and then if you look like where we are for branches that size, we're 10 feet out from the trunk. I mean, as a curiosity, could be nice, but just management thing, maybe not worth it. Or at least I'm also sort of like the pruning on that tree. It's like, okay, a lot of trees to get to, but here we've got one where I could change over the whole tree pretty smoothly. Loppers and pruners, to be aware. So there's the blade side and the anvil side. The anvil tends to crush the wood a little bit, so you use like a little bit of damage. You're trying to where's the wood perfectly, just as something to be aware of. Let's see, where do I want to do my graft? So, folks can take a look. The area right between the wood and the bark, that's where the cells are dividing. That's where cambium is, and the graft's likely to take. And let's see, I'm going to try to do what's referred to as a cleft graft. You can use a chisel for this also. Split in there. And I'm going to take
Get your cameras out, yeah.
my scion wood. This is a grafting knife. I did just sharpen them, so they have a little bit of residue from the sharpening on them. Yeah, I'm just gonna make a couple of cuts to clean the knife. Grafting knife, wicked sharp. Nobody cut themselves today, please. But wicked sharp, like you could, shave hairs with it. It also has a bevel on just one side, like that side's flat and the bevel's on just one side. And if you're right-handed and you have a right-handed knife, it's a little easier to get a flat cut. That said, if you're not set up to keep it wicked sharp, a utility knife with a fresh blade works great.
What do you use to sharpen your?
I've got it's like a leather strop wheel that goes on it. I put on a drill,
Oh wow.
nice.
and then the drill goes. I used to have my bench clamp on the it broke, but I have to hold it with an elbow, and that is pretty fast. Although it's like a leather strop. I think I've taken like a proper stone to them once to like take that much material off them, but the strop goes from like sharp to wicked sharp, and that the power strop there is pretty fast.
Do you use that for the Felco too?
I use a stone for the Falcos because they're making lots of cuts and get dirty, and yeah, it wouldn't hurt. But the Falcos, let's see, this wood is so fat that I'm actually going to go a little further up, and in this case I'm going to prepare my cyan wood to long cuts. Let's see how that looks. Pruners.
Now, is that mostly cambium, no wood yet? Is that the idea of that diameter?
This
Here.
diameter? Well, right, the one that's growing fast. So those cells are like, oh, this thing's putting on those cells are.
But that's all living.
This is
There's
all
no
this
wood.
Well, no, the whole middle is wood.
Oh.
The only cambium is there. You can see there's like a little light green layer, and
okay.
then there's that little line there.
Okay.
That's the cambium.
Right under the bark.
Right under the bark, between the bark and the wood. Now, got this prepared, and slip this in here. Use the pruners and open this up a little bit. Slide that.
And so you're matching up to the cambium on one end.
Yeah, right, exactly. The cambium.
You're good. You're not blocked.
Yeah. And there.
And are you literally trying to line up the cambium on the little
Yep.
cyan wood to the...
Yep, exactly.
Gotcha.
And this few days, nights, this sap's gonna start flowing here. The cells there, that cambium is gonna be like, oh, what was I talking to? And start dividing, start flowing, and hopefully pretty quickly catch the cambium on that root stock. Doing this a week or two ago, like the stick more likely, a little frost, probably not gonna wreck it, but 11 degrees, that's a hard freeze on this wood, and starting to dry it out, and also 11 degrees at night this is probably not pushing that much sap in terms of keeping that alive. So to do it, I think we're probably good doing it now, or to do it in another couple weeks, even as like the buds here are starting to swell, as long as your cyan wood's good and dormant.
So a narrower range of when you could do this
Right,
compared with
because-
like bench grafting, where it's just going to sit in the
Right,
cellar until
yeah.
it's ready to plant out.
Exactly.
And you saved one bud on the cyan wood?
There's two there.
Okay.
And you could do 3. I mean, right, I just cut off, I don't know, 200 buds there, so all that, it was like ready to push 200 buds. Hopefully, my alignment here, I'd say, is like hopefully good enough. It's like, because of where I split it, it's like not perfectly even there. But
It's
I think
like an inch and a half length. Is that typical? Like you shoot for like 2 inches above and an inch down?
more the better, really, and sort of like what, the mechanics of it, how well can you do it.
A longer cut gives you more cambium.
Right, more
to play
surface
with.
area,
Right.
yeah, where you're likely to.
And then it can only support so many buds above it.
Right, that if I put this whole stick, wind may just flop this thing right out, or like I've tried to line it up pretty well. Yeah,
Is Butter trained to select trees?
she's looking for a rodent. She's on to something.
Good puppy.
Part of the nursery management.
Yeah, definitely.
Impressive.
It's like that's what I'm afraid my puppy would be doing if she were off leash here, digging around.
That's what she's doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've had some luck, Nicko, with grafting them later when the tree is actually out.
Yeah.
Just like on a cool day with some not so hot days coming. I feel like apples are so
The apples,
so graftable.
Yeah, I think
So
apples are
wanna
pretty
do this.
forgiving, and I think that really like dormant cyanwood is really
Yeah,
is
yeah.
important. And if the tree is growing, like that's fine. I think probably later in the season, you hit a point. But right, that bud grafting, it's done. July, August. Yeah.
And this is called.
This is top working.
Top working.
Top working. This in this particular graft is called a cleft graft. Okay. On a larger tree, you could split it twice.
And two buds for just give you better odds.
Yep. And the odds are both of these are going to grow, and I'm going to end up pruning one of them off.
What's the tape stuff?
This is a somewhat specialized tape called parafilm, and it's actually it's paraffin tape.
Stretchy and waterproof kind of stuff?
Stretchy, waterproof. It adheres to itself. It also degrades in the sun. It is it's wax. It's a paraffin tape.
Sorry, what was it? What was the name of it again?
Parafilm.
Parafilm.
Or buddy tape is. Yeah, you'll have a chance to handle it.
Is there anything less specialized that can stand in for that? Like wax, just wax? Or?
You could use just wax, or you could use, you could use electrical tape.
I've seen saran wrap. Is that like a no-no?
No, you could totally do saran wrap. Saran wrap and masking tape. Something that holds a little tension is nice. And then, so I'm going to just smear wax on all the open surfaces.
Electrical tape or saran wrap, you might just need to take it off after it's
right.
Healed,
This will stretch and degrade. It's like you're doing a bunch of grafting. It's a really nice material.
Like dissolvable stitches. Yeah.
Right.
Is that specialized wax?
This is and for doing top working outside, it's a very sticky wax. It's bench grafting. I used it for a few years, but it's actually really annoying because it's they stick to each other and your hands get coated in it. But out here it will stick to everything and do a good job sealing things up.
Do you want to seal that cleft pretty well so it doesn't?
The cut, any of the cut areas is just it's going to be drying out.
Is tree coat and stuff like that
Tree
all
coat,
right?
tree coat's